right, here we are, Blair.
Here we are.
What are we doing today? You're gonna.
So, yeah, we're gonna talk about some stuff.
Yeah?
So basically, we're at the place that I used to live.
Shit.
Yeah, I spent quite a bit of time here, actually. My camp was on what used to be the stage that has since been removed. So it's really interesting to see how the city has decided to, move people along by removing structures, but it's like you can remove all the structures you want. People are still going to land here. So,
well, why don't you give me a tour?
Yeah, let's go.
All right.
So this part of the park used to be pretty not very populated because, like I said, I used to camp on the stage, and that's where the majority of us would hang out. And then there was the other people that would be on the river and stuff. I only slept in this area twice, and both times it was, I was rushed out super quick. The cops showed up, I bolted. I always had my backpack on. I would sleep with my backpack on because it was always one of those things where cops showing up was a possibility and I needed to bolt. But when I would get hassled by the police, every fucking time they would come and I was asleep, they would kick me in the head. And they would laugh about it, and they would brag about how proud they are that they got to do that to somebody. I just remember there was this one officer named Warden, and he was really popular amongst all of us because he was the one that would always show up first. He was always fucking there first, Warden. And he was the one who would, kick me in the head. And so he was talking to one of his buddies after the fact, and they were kind of standing around and they're like, oh, well, kicking people in the head isn't necessarily the best course of action when they won't even fucking get up. And it's like, dude, you shouldn't be kicking people in the fucking head anyways. I think to myself, to be a police officer in Eugene, you get up, you put on your uniform, you go to work, and are you proud of the fact that you're doing this to people who are literally struggling to stay alive? How do you go home and sleep at night after that? This is your career choice? I don't understand that whole thought process. So people out here are struggling to survive, and they're dying at a rate that's exponentially increased since I was unhoused back in 2016. So late 2014 is when I lost my housing. I had spine surgery and was overprescribed opioid medication. And after surgery, they titrated me down super quick. So my addict brain was like, hey, heroin's pretty cheap. Maybe you should try that. So I did. Within a couple months, I was out on the streets. Sleeping outside is painful. It literally hurts. You have no cushion between you and the ground. It's, the weather is one thing. And then if it wasn't for, organizations like the one, like Neighbors Feeding Neighbors, which back then was Catholic community workers, I wouldn't have ever had hot food. And it's I was really naive when I became unhoused to begin with, because it was I didn't know anybody who had lived through that. And so when I kind of got forced into that situation, I didn't realize the things that I was going to go through. And, sleeping outside, being in pain, trying to survive, having very little, just being high stress constantly, under threat of arrest, under threat of sexual assault. I was talking about this the other day. So sexual assault numbers for unhoused people is in the 90% range. And 90%. And it doesn't matter if you're male or female, trans, non-binary, any of that stuff. We're talking everybody has been assaulted, probably multiple times. I lost count after 12.
12 to you?
12. It was way more than that. I just stopped counting after 12. Because every time I would pass out and I wasn't with my partner, who was kind of my protective source, I would wake up with someone inside of me. Yeah, they would attack me when I was asleep. So I ended up doing even more drugs to stay awake so that kind of thing wouldn't happen, but it happened anyways. I mean, it was, it would be as sinister as somebody coming to the park and being like, hey, do you want to go take a shower? Do you want some hot food? And it's like, yeah, I do. And then you get to their house and
Oh, so house people who know
house people
that
too.
you need
Yep.
warmth and
Yep.
food.
Yep.
And that happened a lot?
All the time. I just stopped going. I just stopped taking those offers. It happened 3 times before I was like, okay, this is like a baseline behavior for these kind of folks. There was also house people who would traffic young kids. I saw that a lot. There was house people that would traffic older women. Were a really easy target because of mobility issues, especially. So it was, yeah, that was probably the thing that was hardest to get through since I became, since I got stable housing. I started doing therapy, and I found out, I got diagnosed with schizophrenia, and I kind of had an idea through the years that something was, not necessarily wrong with me, but different. And so when I got that diagnosis, it was one of those confirmation things where it was like, okay, here's the issue, let's deal with it. And so I've been through a lot of therapy. I'm on medication. I'm very stable now, whereas before, when I first became housed and I was a mother to a very young child, I was struggling quite a bit. So the sexual assault stuff was the hardest to, work through as far as like the trauma and whatnot. Everything else was difficult as well, but the sexual assault was, not having control of your body is, it's super scary. It's really, really scary. And being in a vulnerable position where you are outside and you don't have any protections, like, I was very distrustful of people in general because, yeah, like I was saying, house people, unhoused people, it didn't matter. There was cops that were doing it. I have a lot of friends that were sexually assaulted by police officers, that were also physically assaulted by police officers. So it's just like the world that exists that people don't acknowledge is so much more sinister than we give it credit for. And then you have places like the city and EPD and, we got these NIMBYs out here who think this is some sort of moral failing when it's like, no, man, this is serious systemic issues, and this occurring is a symptom of those systemic issues. But this is always hard to talk about. So my mom started spanking me when I was 2 weeks old, and the abuse didn't stop. She used to wear steel-toed boots and kick me around when I was really little, toddler size. My family would tell me about this later in life. But when I found out from my family, I was like, y'all didn't stop her? Thanks. Good looking out. So my brother was born in 1987, and my mom moved us up to Oregon, and my dad left shortly after. He went back down to California. All of our family was in California. So basically it was me, my mom, and my brother for the next 10 years until I graduated high school. So it was really weird coming here because in California it's a lot more diverse. When I started school, we moved to Junction City, a little town 12 miles north of here. And I was like, what's with all the white people? I was used to being the minority, so it was like a real culture shock for me. And I didn't fit in. I have curly hair. People didn't like that. I was from California. People didn't like that. I was bullied a lot. So when I hit high school, I was like, you know what? I'm going to play sports. And I was a star athlete. I made All-State. I still hold the shot put record 26 years later. Ended up graduating with honors. And, I realize now why people wouldn't necessarily befriend me. And I didn't realize it then. But I was the poor kid And nobody wanted to be friends with the poor kid, no matter how good she was at sports. I was in all the bands. I was an award-winning jazz soloist. I had a lot of things going for me in spite of the abuse that I was experiencing at home, because I wasn't allowed to hang out with friends outside of school. I was only allowed to do school-related activities. So I just like dove right in. Did real good on my grades, did real good in all the bands, did real good in sports. And then I got a full ride scholarship to OSU. So I chose political science as my major, and I moved into the dorms. Shortly after I started there, I had my first psychotic break. I had mentioned earlier that I was diagnosed with schizophrenia back in 2019. That was the first indication that something was going on with my brain that I didn't understand. So we were camped on the stage,
Right.
and it was like probably 3 o'clock in the morning or something. And yeah, we decided to go for a walk, and that usually meant sex. So we just walked up here, went onto the walkway, and banged it out. And then, 10 months later, I had a kid about it. Yeah, there's like no shame. I was like, I fucking slammed dope in public. I had sex in public. I just did whatever because I, didn't care. When you're in survival mode, you just don't give a fuck. These people don't care about you. Why should you care about how they feel? Like, we weren't people, We weren't people to community members. We weren't people to the cops. So when you hear something enough times, or you're treated a certain way for long enough, you start to believe that yourself. So if I had not found out that I was pregnant, I would 100% have died. Absolutely would have fucking died out here. I know that for a fact. I was getting to the point where I really wanted to not be around anymore because I didn't see a way out at all. I really didn't. Keeping contact with family and friends was really minimal. People would reach out here and there, but I didn't want to quit doing drugs, man. I just wanted to get high all the time. That was where I found solace and comfort. Because like with heroin, it not only kills physical pain, it kills emotional pain. And then with the meth, it kept me awake so that I could, not fall asleep and get sexually assaulted. So that was just my main goal, just stay high, stay somewhat alive. But yeah, it's really hard to explain the amount of despair that exists within your soul when you're out here. So you see this dirt area right here? This was also a super popular place for folks to camp. There was a really, really big camp that got set up there towards the end of my stint on the stage. It was really interesting because the community on this side versus the community on that side, these were like the folks who were used to setting up camp, used to staying in one spot, that kind of thing. But on the stage, we were all the backpack, get up and go folks.
Right.
So basically the only time we would interact with the other side of the tracks is when we would get food or if we needed to exchange drugs. Yeah.
Would you yell at each other across the track?
Yeah. So, what was I going to say? Yeah, middle of the night was when things would get real cold, real desperate. People do their drugs usually in the day and in the evening. And then by the middle of the night, that shit's worn off and nobody's awake. So you just build your little fire, find your little buddy, see if they've got anything to share, make promises of sharing yours next time you scored. But yeah, lots of fights too, man. Lots of fights. Not only between unhoused folks, but there would be people who would come to access the park for, basketball or skate park for whatever. And, you know, they would start fights with us. So there's just a lot of fucking violence. When you're struggling that hard, getting punched ain't no thing. I went to camp behind Rexius. And I don't know if you remember the winter of 2016, but it was a huge ice storm. The last night that I spent outside, it was 12 degrees and there were 6 inches of snow on the ground. So that day I had gone to the Lindholm Center and they had a pregnancy test because I kind of had an inkling, but I wasn't for sure. So I took the test and I was sitting in the bathroom at the Lindholm Center and I looked at this thing and I was like, okay, you can keep doing what you're doing and ruin 2 lives, or you can get the fuck out of here and maybe have a chance at life and, you know, be able to raise this kid. Because everybody I knew in that community that had children, they were all removed. They were taken by the state. So I thought to myself, you know, I can't do that. So it was one of those lucid moments I had in the middle of a giant drug binge where I was like, okay. So I went back to my tent and I packed my backpack and I just literally walked away. I was scared that we were going to lose our home again. So I was like, hey, maybe I should go to school. School money's cool. They pay you. So I was like, fuck it. So fall 2020, I enrolled at Lane. In my 43 years on this earth, I've only been poor. The most I've ever made is like $18,000 a year. And when you have a kid, that's not very much money. So when I started at Lane, I was like, what can I do that'll, you know, break this cycle of generational poverty? So I started looking at different career choices. And when I saw there was an accounting shortage and what the base pay is, I was like, let's do this. But I don't know if you know this.
Maybe.
I don't really fit in with the whole accounting look. So yeah, all the tattoos and stuff. It's funny because I'm older. I'm as old as everybody, my classmates. I'm as old as their parents. I'm heavily tattooed. You know, I got large gauge lobes, got some piercings. And every time I walk into a class on the first day, I get the,
yeah.
Huh. And then, of course, I'm very vocal in class. I'm always raising my hand, hey this or hey that or, you know, whatever. And so I call it capitalism school, the business college, because it is. And so one of the classes that I'm in right now, we were talking about globalization and how it's good for the world economy. And I raised my hand. I'm like, at what fucking cost, though? Let's talk about Sudan. Let's talk about the Democratic Republic of Congo. Let's talk about the 40,000 child slaves that exist so that Apple can get their fucking iPhone batteries. Because I am a firm believer in the whole television, the revolution will not be televised aspect, because it's a privilege to be in class with these folks and be able to say stuff like that and challenge their thinking. You know, he is really cool, man. So I got him into therapy immediately after we left. I straight into therapy for that kid because the final straw was my husband attacked our child. And after everything that I'd been through with him, for some reason I kind of had this idea that, you know, well, if it's only happening to me and not the kid, then it's not that bad, right? And then since leaving and finding out that the kid witnessing the violence is almost as bad as him experiencing it, I kind of feel that mom guilt. Well, fuck, I should have left sooner. But the timing was right. Like I said, U of O had a lot of resources. But anyways, I got him into therapy, and he's been doing that for the last few months. And his therapist actually pulled me to the side on Tuesday, and he goes, you know, your kid is super resilient. He's actually doing real good. And he said, you should be proud of yourself for the work that you and him are doing. And I was like, fuck yeah, that's what I need to hear. I really need to hear that, man. I've been having a rough couple weeks. And so he's really shy. He is very, very shy, but he is so hilarious. And when he gets really comfortable with people, he is a little ham bone. So I'm trying to get him, out in the community more. He sees what I do. He was really excited to see all the news features and the paper and stuff. He looks at me, he goes, "Mom, you're famous." I was like, "Yeah, probably." A little bit. He was like, "I'm going to tell all my friends." I was like, "Cool." Because, yeah, it's really like, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but it's like, it's just mind-blowing and awesome to have my kid be so proud of me. It's just fucking mind-boggling, man. It really is. Did you know that in Fremont, California, they decided to put up legislation to criminalize folks aiding and abetting unhoused encampments?
I do.
And it kind of reminds me of what's going on here with the city coming after us, Like, are we considered aiding and abetting these folks because we're feeding them food? Because they deserve it? Because they're alive people who exist in this world? It's bonkers to me that, like, my thing is everybody deserves access to food without conditions. The fact that we privatized basic necessities like food, water, shelter, all that shit, just shows how broken we are as a society, truly. Like, I can't fucking believe this is how our nation is ending up right now. So.
Are we good?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think this is pretty cool. Oh, sorry, buddy.
Sorry, man.
I'm thinking this is pretty cool, man.
What's cool?
Existing in this world and being able to tell my story and people like listen and maybe like perk their ear up and be like, hey, maybe we should do something about this as a community.